Of course, there's the incredible soundtrack as well. So it's kind of tying everything in of your interest of like the acting, the soundtrack, the darkness. What more could you want?
Right, exactly, yeah. A really lovely mullet.
Hi, I'm Jen Thomas, and for the latest episode of Enemies in Conversation series, today I'm joined by Jamie Campbell Bower. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Jen.
And it's been a weird year for many of us, 2020, last year, I think it is safe to say. For yourself, there was plenty of ups and downs with acting. Obviously, your band Counterfeit came to an end. There was the pandemic. How relieved are you to be in 2021 now?
Oh gosh, relieved. It's funny. I learned so many lessons last year. I was able to put into practice so many things that I had learned throughout my life that in 2021, I'm like, okay, what's next? Like there is sort of, I'm not a pessimist per se, but I certainly, things aren't real until they're real. And I noticed there was a significant lack of social media, new year, new me posts at the end of 2020. And I think we're all sort of feeling the same way where it's like, okay, cool. What are we going to do next? I mean, I'm incredibly grateful for last year. I really am. And I'm excited to see what this year brings for me and what I can do.
There were definitely some posts that I saw where it was like, we're just going to go in slowly, nobody touch anything, maybe this year will be okay, don't do the new year, new me stuff, and maybe it'll all be all right. So yeah, I think everybody is kind of going down that line at the moment of going, can't get any worse, surely.
Right. I love the idea of don't touch anything. That makes me feel like I'm in a shop or like I'm a child, where it's like, just don't do anything, stay deadly still, and everything will kind of work itself out. Which I think is a really good lesson for all of us, I have to say.
Yeah, stay quiet, don't touch anything, and it'll be all good. So you've got your new solo project. You've kicked things off with a bang. You're releasing music under your own name, Jamie Bower. I know you were very excited to have your own Spotify page under your own name. I saw that on your Instagram. So how did that come about? How has it been recording stuff solo?
It's been amazing. I feel creatively in one of, if not the best space that I've been in for a long time, if ever. I've been so used to playing in bands and I want to be cautious here because I don't want to be like, oh well, I'm the lone wolf and I don't need anyone. But there is certainly something for me to be said for just kind of going with gut and going with intuition and not really having to think about things too much. Mm-hmm. And sort of be like, is it okay to do this? Like, is everyone in agreement? Where now I can just be like, oh, I kind of want to do this today, and if it works, then great, and if it doesn't, then fine. It's been really, really enjoyable, and I've, like I said, I feel very, very creatively free. Obviously it came about at the end of Counterfeit, towards the sort of middle of last year. Things were kind of just a bit shaky on the ground there, and I think the pandemic kind of threw into perspective for a lot of people what they wanted to do, and music and art in general is such a volatile and insecure place to lay your hat. And I think for me, like, I've always been an artist. Like, I've always been the person that's like, look, I'm going to go at this hammer and tongs for the rest of my life. I have no real plans or desire to do anything else. And I think that, some people just change of scenery, change of time, and that's totally fine. And that's totally okay. So it sort of seemed fitting that, at the end of Counterfeit, I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to crack on and do what I love and carry on doing what means the most to me. I was very fortunate that, you know, I've started working with an amazing management team who during that time and since then have been so supportive of the decisions that I've made and have just allowed me to really blossom and stretch my wings and do what it is that I love. And, you know, I think ultimately we'll probably end up going further into this, but like, I like macabre stuff. I like the idea of mortality.
Yep.
I like the idea of worlds beyond worlds. I think we live in this world where, you know, the games that we've created for ourselves take away so much spirituality and sensitivity. And I never really had a desire to, I've never actually had a desire to really participate in those games. I really, really enjoy story, and I really enjoy pushing the limits of the human experience and seeing how far I can go and seeing what else is out there. So that's kind of, and that's a tough place. That's a tough place for people to kind of get into when you're like, listen, I want to explore what it means to be in hell. Like, how do you guys feel about that? And like, I don't want to do that. I'm like, okay, I get it. That's cool. I do.
Hold your hand. I'll take you there. It'll be fine. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And that's the other thing that I've learned as well is you can't force people to do things that they don't want to do.
I can't make you go to hell, but I can try and give you a little bit of a clue and sell it to you. It'll be okay.
I'd like to try sometimes.
Because the sound of the new songs is very different, because like Counterfeit was straight up rock and roll. Your solo stuff, I mean, there's elements of like Nick Cave, Patrick Wolf, a little bit of Amanda Palmer, even stylistically. You've got the piano, you've got the classical instruments. Is this the sort of music that you've always wanted to make, or is it just about, right, I'm going to go and try something else, as you say?
I've always had a vision in my head of something of great romanticism, theatricality, grandeur, delusions of grandeur. Someone come and put me in a box, take me back to the home. I've always just been drawn to things that have been super emotive, and so with the first two tracks that I released, it literally came about within the space of a week. Like, I called Matt Terry, who is the producer and the owner of Vader Studios and a lifelong friend. And I said to him, I was back in the UK just for 2 weeks. I think I had just finished my second week of quarantine, and I was due to fly out 2 days after we did the session. In fact, I did fly out 2 days after we did the session. And so I called him and I was like, yo, Matt, I've got this idea. I really want to just like strip everything back and just go to the piano, and these string players, they're keen to do it too. And so the string players and I were like just bouncing ideas backwards and forwards, and there were some things that were working, and I was like, oh God, how am I going to do this? And the time was like, you got to move on this now. And I was like, okay, fine. So I literally like sat down at the piano. I was at my mom's house and I was like figuring everything out. I'd send it over to the string players. They'd send me stuff back. I was like, that's great. Let's try and change that, blah, blah, blah. And then, 5 days later, 6 days later, we're in the studio and we were doing it. And it was just super, supernatural. Like, it was both supernatural and supernatural. It was magical. It really, really was magical. And I speak to Matt often, and he said to me the other day, he said, something really special happened in that session. And I was like, yeah, I agree. I totally feel you. And so, yeah, I have always had these, I mean, even with like the first Counterfeit record, I was composing string sections for certain songs. And I always wanted it to be this big, wide sonic landscape. And, you know, as we progress as artists or as people and as musicians, we get to find out what works and what doesn't work, and where you can kind of put those things and where you can't. And I think it's just been a really, really natural evolution for me, which I've really, really enjoyed. And there have been so many great lessons that I've learned along the way and in my journey as a human, that have led me to this place now, which is why it's so special for me, because through all the good and through all the bad, it's led me to this point, and I'm so grateful for all of those experiences. So sonically, yes. I mean, when it came to those first two tracks, I wasn't really like, oh, I'm going to sit down and it's going to, you know, and I want it to be like Nick Cave. Like, yes, Nick Cave is a big influence on me. I remember listening to murder ballads when I was in my teens and just kind of falling in love with that kind of world. But it was not the thing that I was like, oh, I want it to be like this. It just kind of ended up being like this because of the person that I am and what I've consumed. And then as I've gone on and as you know, as I'm continuing to write the album and as I'm continuing to just write music, there are so many great references for me that have just kind of, that I've never really drawn on. You know, The Cure, Pornography is one of them for me. That whole record is just beautiful, and the way they describe the journey that they went into to make that record that was super, super, super dark, and they let themselves live in that dark place for quite some time to be able to write that. Like, that stuff really excites me and really interests me. Mm-hmm. As an artist, I'm all about putting myself in the situation to be able to create. Like, you know, daily life happenings are daily life happenings, but there's something else out there. And if I can put myself into a space and an emotional place and a zone where I can access something that I would consider to be beyond our world and quite divine, then I'm really flexing my wings and stretching myself out. So yeah.
You mentioned earlier about liking the darker side of things and always having a flair for the theatrical. I know when you released these two songs, there was the whole Somewhere in the Shadows, there was this story, welcoming people in almost. I know I saw the tweets where it was like getting people in, and it was almost this whole process. So in terms of an album and a record, would you ever go down the concept album route, do you think? Or is it just doing it on a song by song basis, but then having this sort of theatrical element that ties it all together?
So yes is the answer to the first part of what you just said. When it comes to a concept album, yes. I mean, I have for this record a very clear map and path that I'm somewhat following. I have it pasted up at the studio that I'm working at, with a great producer here in Los Angeles called Zandy Barry, and he keeps joking because other people will go in and use the studio, and there's my map of like this descent into the darkness, and he's like, I feel so sorry for anybody that comes in and sees that, and I'm like, well, I kind of like that. So yeah, I mean, I do have a very clear vision of what I'm trying to achieve, and I think being older now, I don't want to give too much away because I want it to be I want it to be something that people kind of experience when it's out and understand, and I can talk about it more and take them in there. But you know, I'll put it this way, like, there's so much great reference for me to draw on in literature as well as music. Something like Dante's Inferno is something that at the moment is really helping me glue it all together and drag it all together, but also personal experience as well of falling into darkness. And there is such a duality to life. I think, you know, we often forget that in order for there to be light, that there has to be darkness. And when we're in these moments of light, sometimes we kind of forget the darkness and forget the lessons that we've learned when we've been in the darkness, and we just exist in that moment. And that's beautiful, and that's fine, and that's wonderful. And yes, I am all about being present and in the moment. But as an artist, I really want to explore the mental depths of the descent, being in that space and then coming out the other side, because I think for me, and also for those people that I know and that I talk to regularly, that's something that we can all kind of relate to. And what is it that dwells in the shadows, and what is it that lives there? And there are worlds beyond this world that we're living in, and how do we kind of access those worlds, and how do we allow ourselves to be a conduit for those things to come through? And then when they do come through, what happens when we're really in there, and then what happens when we get out the other side? And I think that that's a journey that I've experienced on multiple occasions throughout my life, but only now, being slightly older, am I able to kind of recognize those particular points. And it's interesting as well, because having this map that I've got of the journey is really allowing me to see myself through this story. And I'm so there certainly is a story, and there certainly is a theme to it, but the theme is very real. Like, it's a very it's grounded in reality. It's not a made up story, as it were. It's certainly something that I think is very real to me, and to those people that I talk to, as I said.
And people who know you from your acting predominantly might be quite surprised to know that you do music, that you had the band, that you had this project. But then on the other hand, when you look back at it, a lot of your projects have involved music. Obviously, there was the breakthrough with Sweeney Todd. You did the West End with Bend It Like Beckham, playing the piano in Mortal Instruments. Do you actively seek out projects that kind of combine the two so that you can have the acting and the music, or is it just somehow turned out that way?
It's just somehow turned out that way, Jen. I mean, I was on a call this morning with some friends, and I was just literally just talking about the idea of the sort of darker nature of existence. And I said, it's really funny, because every single project that I've done pretty much has been dark. and I'm sat there and I'm like, oh, hold on, that has to mean something. Like, that's that. Oh, I get it now. That makes perfect sense. But
is it me? Is it something about me that they're seeing? You look dark and brooding.
Miserable. What's wrong with me?
I just want a rom-com happy roll.
I'm not sure yet. So no, I mean, I've never gone out and searched actively for roles that have combined the two. I think that just the kind of person that I am, and the fact that I've played music all my life, is something that that lends itself very well to those projects.
Would you ever want to do a film soundtrack, like kind of combining the two, as in writing for it?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love that. Like, to immerse oneself into a world and into someone's story and see what creatively comes out of that would just be such a joy, like such a blessing. But I have pretty grand visions for this project. That sort of thing is certainly within my universe, and certainly circling around my universe at the moment. But yeah, I would love to write something for a film, or for just write a score for something. I think that would be really fun.
Would it be a dark one? Would it be a horror?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I can't. I mean, look, I can write very, very happy, beautiful country music songs. So I could always do a country movie. But yeah, I think it would have to be sort of tragically romantic and tragically dark. And yeah, horror is also something that I'm fascinated by, and I've been watching so many horror movies during this time of lockdown and during the pandemic, that I'm certainly in a space right now where I could attack that with some vigor.
Immersing yourself in it, because as you say, one of the songs for Counterfeit, It Gets Better, that was very positive. Okay, it was talking about some of the darker side of things, but it was very uplifting, very positive. A lot of the fans like joined in on the video for that. And then you have your new songs where you've got like Start the Fire, and it's effectively saying it's all gone to shit. It's like burn things down. So it's safe to say that it's kind of coming from a different headspace now, isn't it? We kind of had a complete 180 from It Gets Better to just burn everything, basically.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny with It Gets Better. Like when we wrote that song, and I've said this in interviews, like I was really unsure about it. Like I was like, I don't know. Like everyone was like, oh my God, it's amazing. It's a hit. And there's all these voices. And I'm quite like, I try to be a very sensitive person, and I try to accommodate and listen to people as much as possible. So I'm like, okay, great, like that sounds fine. And then I remember calling someone at the time and being like, I just don't know, I want to write really dark music, like I don't know about this. And they're like, no, it's great, it comes from you. And I'm like, okay, fine, yeah, it does come from me. And I think, you know, that song for me is it does live in a place that is very real for me, which is the idea of community, and the support that we can get through being in community. And that's, you know, why we use the followers and the supporters of the band for the video, because, you know, in all honesty, like without those people, I think that, you know, I wouldn't be where I am today. And that we did this whole section for the video that didn't end up making it, but that was me sort of sat there talking about terrible experiences that I've gone through, but the fact that I'm still here, and if we can share in those things, and if we can kind of get those things out into the open, that then that we can move forwards, and we can move forwards with love, and we don't have to feel so alone. And I think that that's always been like a running theme for me throughout my life, because we live in this space and we live in this world where capitalism and business has brought us to this place where we're not really talking about the shit side of life. We're not really talking about what it means to want to crawl into your bed for days on end and not do anything. Just the pressure of modern living has really torn us apart. And that is interesting to me, because I've learned throughout my life that actually I need people, and I need to share, and I need to hear other people's stories, because it makes me feel less alone. And that is very, very present throughout my career as a musician, and throughout my existence as a human being. So whilst sonically It Gets Better was, yes, very kind of happy and la la la, the sort of the underlying message behind it still was ringing quite true to me. I think musically now I'm far more drawn to, like I said, this tragic romanticism, this Russian way of being, where it's just explosive and expressive, and just kind of draws you in and washes over you. And that's kind of actually what I've always been into. It's just sometimes, in order to be able to do that for me as an artist, I have to be alone, and not alone with my own thoughts. In fact, I have to be kind of outside of my own thoughts. But it just requires a level of like stillness. So yeah.
And the other big news that you've had recently is obviously the announcement that you're going to be in the next series of Stranger Things. How was it for you to actually get the news out there, and how mad was your phone on that day when the news came out? Your notifications must have gone mad, I assume.
Well, you were one of the first people that messaged me, actually, believe it or not. On Instagram, you're like, how crazy is this? And I'm like, I know, it's insane. Well, I had actually got the job. I think I was told about it in January of last year, and I had to keep it under wraps for so long. I mean, I'm still to this day humbled and blown away by the fact that I've been allowed this opportunity to be in a show that fucking amazing. Ultimately, like, it's a great show, and I feel so blessed and fortunate to be in this position with some incredible creative people and people who are as obsessed with art as I am. And so, yeah, it was nuts. Like, it was really, really, really nuts. Like, I still have those pinch me moments. Like, I've done some work already, and just being there is a real, it's a real experience. It's just something really, really magical and really, really special about working on that job. And yeah, everyone was super, super stoked for me, and that means everything. But I'm one of those people that I like to be quite reserved in my joy. in my joy. I do allow myself to be happy, but I do tend to be like, oh, thank you so much, because, you know, I there's a great level of respect for those things that I have, because I know all too well, you know, just how things can be amazing and then things can't be amazing. And so I really don't take for granted anything that happens. I'm humbled and blessed by every single opportunity that comes my way. So yes, even now I'm still in these like, pinch me, this can't be real moments. It's kind of insane.
Well, I'm guessing that happened previously. Obviously, there was the whole Game of Thrones series that was meant to happen and then didn't. So I should imagine there must have been an element of, oh God, fingers crossed, please don't let this go the same way. You're going to kind of be on tenterhooks, and nobody could blame you after that has happened, of going, I'm going to wait until the very last minute to announce this, then nothing can go wrong, and then it'll all be fine.
Yeah, I mean, that's the nature of the entertainment industry. I think it's always been something that I've said is nothing's real until it's real. I've experienced people get so overexcited, not overexcited, but so excited for things that I'm doing. And I'm like, yeah, sure. But until it's happening, it's not happening. And I take that with me wherever I go. And so, you know, one of the things that how I live my life now is just try and do one right thing after the other. And just make sure that you're remaining, or I'm remaining, in a space where I'm like, okay, enjoy this, take it in, drink it in. Yeah. Okay, great. Moving forwards. Yeah. So there's certainly been some lessons that I've learned along the way in life that have led me to a place where I'm sort of calmly, quietly reserved, yet happy.
Cautiously optimistic, I think, is a way of putting it. And you mentioned about you keep being attached to these dark projects. I think Stranger Things definitely counts as dark. So like the trend is continuing there for you in the things you're getting involved in.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's just that the show is just amazing, and what the Duffer Brothers do and how they write and all their references it's just right up my alley. It really, really is. And I'm yeah, it's a total blessing. The show's amazing.
And of course, there's the incredible soundtrack as well. So it's kind of tying everything in of your interest, of like the acting, the soundtrack, the darkness. What more could you want?
Right, exactly. Yeah, a really lovely mullet.
Yeah, like, that's going to be your next thing. It'll be a bit here with the mullet, and the fans will love it. You've always had this really dedicated fan base, and what has their support and their reaction been like to the new music so far?
Oh, it's been amazing. It really has been. You know, for me to have people that have followed my career for some time, and the new people that are coming in now, it's really overwhelmingly powerful, and they've just been so sweet and so supportive of everything that I've done, and they seem to respond to this music, and that's really, really incredible. I think I never really try to go out there and consciously create for other people. Like I do create for the sole purpose of expression and of truth, and of giving back in that sense, because, hey, that's my job and that's what I believe in. And to have people that are supportive of that is really incredible, because whilst I'm not creating for other people, what I am trying to do always is talk about real stuff and talk about real feelings and talk about just what it means to be here. And if that resonates, then I'm doing good.
And with the shows that you did with Counterfeit, they're always very full on. You often spent a lot of time off the stage, climbing up pillars, in the middle of the crowd. With the solo project, obviously touring and gigs are off at the moment for many places because of the pandemic, but would you like to tour this music and do shows by yourself, perhaps?
I think I've got visions and plans, of doing something, but doing something differently and doing something that's really special. I think, like you said, from kind of drawing people into the world when the songs were releasing on Twitter, which was literally something that I was like in the spur. I had no plan to do this. I wasn't sat on my phone beforehand thing, it wasn't like 2 days before that I was going, I know what I'll do here. I'll create a whole thing. I was like literally half an hour before I was like, oh my God, that sounds really fun. Let's do that. And so from that, as the music is progressing and as the creative process is progressing, I'm able to see a lot more of a vision of how this is going to translate live and of what I want to achieve. Because ultimately, and the thing that I really believe in here, and the thing that I'm talking to a lot of people about, is like, this project is not about me. Like, this isn't about Jamie Bower, being a musician. This is actually something a lot deeper than that. And it's more of a story for people to immerse themselves into and to find some truth in. And so with that, I have been having these dreams and visions and conversations of how I plan on translating this into a live situation. All being well, if it's in the stars and it's meant to be, I want to create something really, really, really unique and really special.
So you're going to have a very exciting year, to say the least, with Stranger Things, with the album. Good luck with it. I hope it all works out well, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much, Jen. It was a pleasure to speak to you.